Hey guys, Dark Swordsman here, and today I want to show you my automatic railway system in Astroneer. I think the logic systems in Astroneer are really expensive, especially just to clear the main game, so this is what I came up with to try to solve this problem. My main goal was to reduce the cost of the system, so that way it can be done as early as possible and with as little resources as possible, because while playing the game, I realized that the amount of resources I would need to spend to create better logic systems would basically be not worth it when I can use those for other things. And I just wanted an automated railway system that can work, so that way I can just get straight to doing the game, right? The system I came up with was designed for one rail car or a train and to be as simple as cheap as possible. So basically the only requirements are these rail posts, the rail car, the rail junctions, auto arms, and then whatever storage system you want, and I'm assuming you're going to use auto extractors and whatnot at these stations. Besides that, you will need 2 button repeaters per junction, and then 1 counter per junction. It's 1 counter per junction up to 4 stops, and then if you're doing more than 4 stops, it's going to be 2 counters per junction up to 64, and I'll explain why. Hello, Future Dark here. I did not explain why it was 4 and then up to 64. It is actually not up to 64, it's up to 32. In the game, each counter can do 8, and when you stack a counter on the other, it multiplies. So the max is 8 times 8, which is 64, but as I'll explain, it's actually 32 because of each station needing 2 numbers. So 4 for 1, 32 for 2. Here's a quick clip of the system working, and the point of this system is to equally distribute between the stops. This allows you to get a diverse amount of resources at a pretty consistent rate, rather than it prioritizing one over another. In an ideal world, we would have this work with better logic, where we can say, like, I need more resin or I need more compound, and you can prioritize those stops maybe, but that logic doesn't really exist. If you did want to speed up the total throughput, you could add the double storage or the medium storage on these rail cars. You could do multiple rail cars, you could do a rail engine, and then you can do rail stations, which allow it to unload faster. So that would give you higher bandwidth, basically. The basic logic of this came from me sitting here and staring at a screen for 2 hours and trying to figure out how this will work. This part's going to be a little complicated, so if you want to skip, you can. But this is to try to explain how I came up with it and what it's doing. But basically, you have a number of stops, right? And after each stop, it will deposit. That's the goal is. You'll grab, deposit, right? So this rail post on the left is always going to be hit twice when it deposits, right? So if you go and then come back to deposit, that's 2. Go and come back to deposit, that's 2. Go and come back to deposit, that's 2. So you're able to use these numbers to your benefit. And let's say you have stop 1, stop 2, stop 3, stop 4, right? For every stop, there is 2 hits of this post. So what you can do is you can use this logic at each junction. So if the train's going to pass by twice for every station, you can take the station number and multiply it by 2. So if this is station 1 on the right, that's going to be 2, this one's going to be 4, this one's going to be 6, and this one's going to be 8. And then all you have to do is at each junction, for the stop it's going to go to, that's what you set the counter to. So in this case, this junction on the left, this first one is 8, this next one is 6, the third one is 4, and then technically the last one is 2, but because that's like the default, it doesn't have a number. If you were to set this counter to 2, what's unfortunately going to happen is, since you're hitting the post twice, if it were to go here, come out, hit once, and then hit again when it's going in, it'll constantly hit this one and it'll skip this one. So that's kind of how it works. But basically, the logic is, do your station numbers from furthest to closest, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you multiply that by 2, and then that's the number for the junction. That's all you really need to know. That's the logic behind it, and it will automatically distribute between all of them. The only way to get this working properly, though, is you need to take the rail car This is the weird part. It's just the way the numbers work, because you need an odd number when it comes back and an even number when it goes. So that way when it hits, for example, 8, an even number, it will go to this one, or 6, an even number, it will go to this one. But you take the rail car, you put it all the way at the end, and then you turn it on, so then it triggers all these for odd numbers and goes forward with even. That's kind of the way that works. And now I'll show you how to set it up. So I don't know exactly how to explain this simply, but I'm just going to explain what each part is. Hello, Dark from the future again. Before I explain this next part, I just forgot to mention, you will need a storage sensor for the rail car. I usually just put it right back on here like this. And then I take the pin and put it back into itself and leave it on the default setting of full or empty with 2 green arrows. This just makes sure that it only activates the rail car when it is fully empty or gets full. This is how the rail car triggers itself to go to the next stop. First of all, you need a trigger when it's coming back to set the junction from that direction. So 1 pin here is always going to go to whichever direction it needs. So in this case, this rail post is from this direction, and the other part of the track is on that side. So you need to put a pin into this side because it will trigger this junction. If you do this one, it will go to the right. If you do this other one, it will go this way. And then the button repeater is here because we need 2 inputs for each of these. So the first one is coming back, that's 1 each. And then going forward, that's where it gets a little weird. So same logic for going forward. There's going to be a default state. The default state is the longest direction. So whatever you think your furthest station is, you're going to set the junctions to go to that station. So in this case, when it triggers past here, it will always default to going to forward because it's hitting this pin right here. So that's why we have 2 pins, because it comes from this direction and then it goes forward by default, right? And in this direction, it also has 2 pins, but the second pin has a counter on it. This is the counter where it goes back and forth, back for odd, forward for even. When it hits 8 in this case, it will trigger that turn. And thankfully, I guess because of the way the calculations work with the ticks, you don't need a delay on this as far as I've tested. It will, as far as I can tell, trigger the counter first and then trigger the button on the second tick. So it will always set it forward with this button repeater, but the first tick will be this button repeater and then this counter, and then the next tick will be this button repeater. So it always defaults to it will always do the turn next. So as far as I can tell, the system works reliably and you never have to worry about it. The only exception is there's no logic for multiple trains. So that's why I recommend doing like 5 or 6 cars, right, with a rail engine, so it goes faster to improve your bandwidth. Because if you're getting to the point where you need multiple rail cars, that means your bandwidth is getting limited. And if you still want to use this system, that's when I recommend doing, for example, sub networks. So in this case, let's say that we only want 4 for this, really, but there is going to be maybe another set of resources all the way out here. I could set this up with 2 rail stations or something, so that way there's a second network of maybe 4 stops over here that's pushing to this one station. That will create a bottleneck of sorts here, and perhaps there's a way to, like, maybe, I haven't tested this, but maybe this will work. You could increase these numbers. So like, even if you have a subnetwork, you'll be able to have, say there's 4 stops over here, right? You could theoretically increase the number of these by however many stops are over there. So like, if there's 1, 2 stops, that'll be 1, 2, you would just increase the number of stops. So if this is a, what are they called? Like hub, like a transition hub or something. And you had 4 stations over here, just like this setup, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you would just set your counters appropriately. At least that's off the top of my head how that logic would work. So in that case, you would get 4 stops at this station, but it would be accounting for the bandwidth of these other stops over here. It would reduce the total bandwidth of the network, but it would ensure that there is still an equal distribution of resources from all the stops. Hopefully that explains it. I did get a bit rambly at the end, but that was mainly because I showed the system working and I showed you what you need to do to set it up. And then that was just more hypothetical stuff. So I do want to make a shout out real quick. There's this creator called Kuya Game, and I watched one of his videos on storage. This is really cool because say that this resource, hold on. Let's say that this resource is, you know, put on this platform, it automatically goes up into the correct barrel. So that's really cool. And then if there's no room in these barrels, if you have like an alternative resource, you use another auto arm to transfer it to another set of barrels. So it's very cool. I'll link their video in the description. At the end of this, I just want to say, I do think Astroneer would benefit if there's a longer end game of sorts to have logic blocks. I'm going to make a comparison here to Besiege, which has logic blocks where you can do and or all sorts of operations. There's certain sensors and all these other sorts of things that you can combine together to create logic. And then there's, for example, a mod called Logic Extensions where you can program in basic JavaScript to do more complicated things, which is actually something that I did in another video, which I'll show here and link in the description. But that would probably help if there was maybe a more expensive but very easy to get and simple logic block or even wireless networking. Because one of my solutions that I was thinking of was it would be cool if I could just call nearest car using these logic things, right? But the problem with that is, in reality, these runs aren't this short, so I would have to run a ton of button repeaters over a really long distance and then put them into like a central computer, but that computer itself would need to have a ton of different logic and things to like be able to like override to call a certain resource that I need or something, right? Like at that point, the level of logic and resources required to make that work is so not worth it. To be fair, again, I've seen a lot of complicated, like I've seen and all these different gates, like logic gates and stuff people have created. Maybe I'll show some videos here with also their links in the description. All of those are great, but I don't understand why they're used or what context, because the point to which we were able to complete the game, me and my friend, we didn't need to do any of that. Like we skipped a bunch of planets, we got really fast, we were able to just dig to the center of the earth on all of them and then get to the end game without activating all things. So yeah, I don't know. All I know is that this system is really cheap. It just works. It has an even distribution. I figured it's much better to do this and have direct access than to make a gigantic, crazy loop of railways, which just, I feel like wastes a ton of railway and cuts a ton of space. Like, it just doesn't make sense for me to have a loop with rail stations, because then I would need to make a bigger train, and I don't know. It just, this system in my head worked. There's junctions for a reason, and they have automation on them, so why wouldn't I be able to use them without these crazy expensive logic gates? But anyway, hopefully this video helped you. I just wanted to share this because it was mind-blowing to me that no one had come up with something like this before, or some cheaper system. This, of course, doesn't have any fault tolerance, but there's not really any faults that can happen with the system, I think, beyond low power, but that just slows things down, and that's kind of it. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Feel free to like if you want, and if you want to subscribe, I might post more stuff like this. I just kind of post random stuff about things that I do. So yeah, if you're interested in that, then go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.